Mark Dominik spent 20 plus years in NFL front offices in a bunch of different ways, obviously, that ultimately lead to a general manager job with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now is doing radio and TV and all of the different things. A new podcast, the GM Shuffle.
Yes.
Lots of spokes in the fire here this week.
Yeah, I feel like a millennial. Like I've got like 17 jobs right now just to make everything work, but it's all good. It's all been fun. It's been easy to talk about football. Like, how bad is that, right?
And learning some new tricks. We were just talking, and you were talking about some of the work that you're doing for VSiN, and I think that that's fascinating, that you're kind of learning the betting space after the career that you had in the NFL, where that is very much something that you don't look at.
Right. It's completely taboo. I mean, when I was GM, you didn't even want to talk about it. When I worked at ESPN, you didn't say a word about it.
No.
Like, you got in trouble if you even kind of mentioned it. Now it's like, let's all just talk about it everywhere we can. So it has been interesting. It's been unique to understand like what betting lines mean, and all these little parlay bets, of course, but then all the little one-offs that we were talking about, where you can just bet on, tackles or catches or yards, and just what do you think is going to happen in the game. And I think there's some, obviously, there's a lot of research, a lot of analytical stuff that you can kind of dive into. So I think this is why, and sometimes it's just the scout of me. It's like I'm watching this part of this defense saying I don't see how that's going to be able to stop what they can do offensively, or vice versa. I see this player as like Cooper DeJean is a guy that was my best one. Is I had Cooper DeJean as an interception, not for a touchdown, but I said if you pick one player that is going to get a pick, I thought it was Cooper DeJean just because.
What were the odds on that? Do you remember?
Oh, it was big. No, it was big. But it was a good one because, again, when you look at the Eagles and knowing how they attack and understand that their mindset was to just use the front four and not to blitz, it meant that they're going to have a rover, whether it was going to be Reed, Blankenship, or was it going to be Cooper DeJean, that's going to have a lot of chances to pick off a ball because of the way they run their defense around, especially when you just have to rush four. And so I thought that seems like the logical place to say. So not Quinyon Mitchell, which I think a lot of people thought if somebody's going to get pitched, it's to him. Uh-huh. No, he's locked down. But those safeties had a lot of freedom to go make a play, and Cooper did.
This is fascinating to me because of the ways where, like, we talk a lot about, like, where things are going and process and data, and I feel like this is an evaluation and analysis that hasn't existed in the betting space for so long because people who actually had experience were not allowed to enter that space. Right. And so I'm curious to see how it kind of changes maybe markets over time,
right,
when you actually have football people getting involved in the mix. Anyway, you called the Eagles win.
I did. It was hard.
Were you surprised that it was as lopsided as it was, though?
For sure.
Okay.
I never saw that. I was more of like, I had confidence. I always thought the line was going to go to more of an even kind of a thing, where just because I thought the East Coast money, as I'm learning this stuff, I thought the East Coast money was going to come in and kind of change things, and it never did. And the over-under also surprised me because I just felt like when you watch those teams play, the magic number to beat the Chiefs was obviously 30 this year. If you could get 30 points, you're going to beat the Chiefs, and not many people could get there. But I felt like the Eagles, the way they were playing, that they're going to get to the 30, which made me think, okay, because there was just too many options for them, the way that they can attack you. But I was surprised at the game, the way it went. Again, I started my career in Kansas City, and I left Kansas City on my own accord. And so I've always been a Chiefs fan. My whole family's, like, for the most part, Chiefs fans. So when I was out there saying Eagles, that was not easy for me either. But, go with your gut, what you think.
And then you root for yourself to be right.
Oh, of course.
That's what we all do.
Throughout my entire career.
I mean, it's a tough pick, too, because you were betting against Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
Yeah, and
betting, destiny.
Yeah, and destiny. So you're betting against, like, the best quarterback. And what's interesting about this draft, I think, is there's no Patrick Mahomes. There's no Josh Allen's. There's no Lamar Jackson's. There's no even Trevor Lawrence's. It seems like. What's your kind of eval of this quarterback class, having sat in that chair, understanding the positional value of it, but understanding that that's something that if you miss on, it can be pretty tragic?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting you say that because – and I like the names, but I'm surprised you would add Trevor Lawrence to that conversation, right, based off of what he's done. Like, I always struggled when they did that deal. It made no sense to me. Like, why are they – I understood all the other ones, but Trevor Lawrence has never really taken that step. Yeah, he took him to a postseason, had the nice comeback win against Justin Herbert, but I'm like, how did he get the $55 million? Like, what spurred that? It was kind of surprising to me. So when
do you not see someone who has the ability to, in a better environment, return value on that?
I don't think so. And I'm sorry to say it, but I think that's one of those deals where it's Carson Wentz, like, where I feel like it's going to, in a couple of years, I just don't know if it's going to change because there is talent in Jacksonville. They weren't talentless. I thought they had a decent roster. I don't think it was as good as I think the Jacksonville fans felt like it was, but I thought there was talent there. And I still think there's some talent there in terms of running back, offensive line, receiver. We'll see where Trevor Lawrence goes, but in terms of this class, you know, as we get closer, you're going to fall more and more in love with the quarterback. You just do, right? When I was GM at the Bucs, I drafted a quarterback with my first pick. And it was Josh Freeman, who was great. Like early on, he was fantastic. He was the up-and-coming quarterback. But the thing that I thought about after having Josh through a couple of years is that's still Matt Ryan, that's still Cam Newton, and that's still Drew Brees. I still have the fourth best quarterback in my own division. But if you don't get that guy, if you're the Tennessee Titans, if you're the Cleveland Browns, if you're the Giants, the Jets, the Raiders, if you're one of those teams, you realize if you don't get a guy, you have no shot, and you're going to get fired. Right. And so that's why quarterbacks always accelerate up the board. And Cam Ward, to me, is deserving of conversation at the number one pick. Abdul Carter is by far the best player in this draft class.
By far.
By far. By far. It's just a medical. You got to get through the medical if you're comfortable with the little bit of medical stuff. But I mean, I don't. You hate to do that, but I don't see a bust potential whatsoever in Abdul Carter at all. I don't see where that trait is. He can drop in coverage. When he closes with an impact, he hits with pop. He's got great pad level. He's got a variety of rush moves. But he's so athletic that you could play him in a 4-3 defense and have him drop and cover a tight end. He can cover a tight end. Like, he's that athletic, but he's also that strong and that explosive. So, I mean, to me, it's a really hard decision when you have a guy that's that obvious. Right. Like, he's better than Micah Parsons was at this point in college. He's a better player than Micah was at Penn State. So it's going to be interesting, but I think the Titans they'll let us know in the next 2 weeks.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Because if they don't do something quickly in free agency, they've told you they're drafting a quarterback. Because they cannot go in the season with Will Levis as number one QB. They won't do it.
I've all of the different follow-up questions that I have here. I'm trying to figure out where to go first.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is there's been so much discussion about timing of all these moves. Starting off with Trey Smith, who's been franchise tagged, and they say they're working on an extension, but why do you tag him before the deadline unless you have a trade partner?
Do you think he's staying there?
There's so many weird
I think
timing
they realize that the
to
market is the market, and Trey Smith's market was a lot bigger than they expected. There's enough teams out here who are going to pay him north of $20 million that they realize it's cheaper to tag him, and so therefore they wanted to.
Oh, to keep him?
To keep him.
Okay. Because I was thinking if the market's the market and teams are going to pay him, you could tag him and trade him.
You can do that too.
And then you can actually get something.
But I look at Kansas City, I think, and you may be right, like that's the right way to do it, right? You could do the same thing with T. Higgins, right? You could not let him get to the market and do the same thing to him theoretically. The difference for me in Kansas City is that is, again, their Achilles heel. Like having to move Joe Thuney out to left tackle because they've missed on a couple offensive linemen, which we all miss, so that really hurt them. So to sit there and say, okay, now we're going to pull another big piece of the puzzle out of the organization where that's the most important part. Right. And so I just don't think you can let Trey Smith go. I think they're more worried like the market was getting away from them where they thought it was going to go. Instead, let's tag him and slow things down and kind of go to work on trying to get that long-term extension that he wants. So I'd see it that way, and I could be dead wrong. Like, I could absolutely be wrong. But I think if I'm Kansas City, the one thing I don't want to do is go back to be that offensive line that they played against the Bucs when they lost the Super Bowl because they got decimated. And it felt like that in this game.
It very much did, right? Like, they have to find tackles.
They have to find tackles. And, they paid Creed. Joe is probably about ready for an extension. Joe Thuney, I think, is ready for an extension because of how he's played and what he's been able to do. But if you can keep Trey, then you just draft one more tackle and see what you can do. But I can't. It seems easy, right? You're just like, I'll just draft another Trey Smith in the 5th, 6th round. I can't remember which one it was, but it just doesn't happen all the time. It's a lot harder just to replace a guy that's that consistently powerful and strong. I think it's more about the guys behind Trey. Like the running back room is more important for Kansas City to fix than I think it is the offensive line. I'd make sure I keep that offensive line together. But I'm a big offensive line nerd, so.
Well, this is actually, and we had Mark Ross on earlier in the week, and he was saying that veteran offensive linemen are surefire. So if you can go sign one in free agency or like re-sign that, pay that person because you know what you're getting. And sometimes the draft picks will take some time to develop at that position in particular. Like a wide receiver hit the ground running in the last few years anyway. Like there's some positions you plug right in. O-line maybe takes a minute. And so if you're evaluating where to spend money, that at least you kind of know what you're getting at that position in free agency.
Yeah, I think offensively, the way I would say it is the closer to the ball, the better chance they're going to be successful earlier in their career, or the further away from the ball.
Got it.
So the further away you are, so the wide receivers, the tight end, they're going to have a better chance. The running back, they'll all have better chances to be successful early. But it's the offensive line, because the problem is when you're evaluating these guys in college, right? They're going against 18, 19-year-old kids, or maybe 22-year-old kids, but they're not going against a 28-year-old defensive lineman who's been in the league for 7 years, who's a dude, yes, who's like living this life. And so that seeing that and watching that play out makes offensive line a lot harder. So I didn't draft as many offensive linemen because I did what Mark Ross talked about. I either kept our own or I went and bought them from somewhere else, but I wasn't going to go and just go, hey, let's go risk a pick, even though I'm big into, like, you want to take a guard top 12, top 10, take him, right? It's the impact they have, and now that we know where these numbers are going with the salaries, there's really not a position you can say, well, he's not worthy of a top 10 pick, because guards they're going to make over $20 million a year now.
We're talking about the opportunity cost related to the quarterbacks if you take them early. And you kind of brought something up. If a quarterback, the Josh Freeman one, and the comp to the other guys in the division, if a quarterback is better than the one that you have now, and you need a quarterback, does that make the pick worth it? Or do they have to, what makes that pick in that range a good pick?
Yeah, so I love your question, and I think that for me, if you can improve that position, you try to. Because what's the worst thing that happens? You still have a tradable asset at a really important position. It may not get you the value you obviously gave up, but you still incrementally move that team. I call it the Watt equation, right?
The Watt equation?
The Watt. Think of not TJ, but JJ, right? And as great as he was, like elite, right? Probably for a while he was the best defensive line. And the best he could get Houston to was 9 wins. And as soon as you got Deshaun Watson, the old Deshaun Watson, they suddenly became a playoff team because the quarterback just has that much impact. So you can have the best defensive player in the NFL, but you're not going to win enough games because you can't score.
Yeah, very similar to the Browns this year as well.
Oh, exactly. We could name it Myles Garrett. We could name it Max Crosby. We could name it Saquon Barkley. There's so many, right?
Yeah.
But that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, so we're talking about the changes and the ways to approach the draft, and something I'm really interested in. You talked about Abdul Carter a little bit, but how to break ties. And I know that people say the combine is less of a, okay, I'm moving this guy's scouting grade up, and more of, well, he has more of a pedigree. I'm breaking a tie between two of the guys with the same grade. Is that how you approached it, or how did you kind of approach the grades and stack breaking, for lack of a better word?
The way I set a board, this might be I'll try to be short-winded, but the way I set a board is you would obviously try to break down, let's say, the wide receiver position, right? And so now I'm putting them in what I call pods. And so I'd grab like 4 receivers that I thought, from a GM's perspective, to my scouts, these 4 guys all are third-round type of guys, let's say, right? That I thought they were third rounders, but my scouts had them in different spots. And we would break those 4 guys down, we'd watch their tape again, and then everybody had to privately rank, how would you take those 4 people? And you had to turn it in, and then we'd talk about it in front of the group. I'd open them up and say, look, this is how you guys had it. Why? So you do that for each position, and then you break that down and you say, okay, now let's maybe go to the first round or whatever it is. I've got these 2 wide receiver ones, but I've also got left tackle, I've got a defensive tackle and a corner. So let's put those in a pod and let's talk about that. And so it's podding the guys up to try to break the ties, because you got to rank them. And then it's a lot. For me, the concept like I have to have the final say, the GM gets to pick the draft picks, that kind of stuff, that's true. But the reality is I never made a pick that my head coach was like, But I've been part of that when I saw it happen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's here walking around. You might know him on Pro Football Talk. His name's Chris Sims. John Gruden did not want Chris Sims, and I think John's always made that very clear, and Chris knows that too. But that was a negotiation in a war room where, because he was left-handed, John didn't want Chris Sims. But the front office did. And I saw how hard that was for the 2 players that were kind of negotiated. If you get this guy, I'll take this guy. Neither guy's career worked out in Tampa. And so that taught me back when I was just the director of pro that you can't ever get to that point. You can't. So it's if it's a point where I can't get the coach on board, I'm just going to move. That's how I break my tie. And so it's really going to come down to...
Even if you're right.
Even if I'm right.
The player,
because the reality
it won't work here.
Yeah, so I wasn't a guy, like when I was GM, I never called the player on draft day. Because I always felt like that's the coach's job, because he's the one working with the guy, not me. and I'm going to stay the business side of it all. And I was happy for him, and hearing the scream on the other side of the phone, it's fantastic. It's probably one of the best things about draft day is the family's reaction around the young guy that gets picked. But for me, the coach, because he's going to be there every day, working with that guy every day, if he's not fully on board because he had liked another guy better, I'm putting that player in a square peg in a round hole, and I don't want to do that. So that's how I'd break a tie. The other thing would be the medical is going to have to come into a tie breaking if it comes down to it. And we changed things up in Tampa. I don't know if they still do it. But most people go A, B, C, D, or F medical, right? Because we hate the letter E some reason. I feel bad for somehow E always got
How did E get left out in that way?
eliminated. I don't know what happened to E, but I broke it down differently. And you might appreciate this, but I started looking at it as a C1 through 9, a B1 through 9, a D1 through 9. And so ones were like sprains and strains. Twos might be hamstrings. High ankle sprain would be a 2. Ones would be groins, like the simple things that, the soft tissue things. When you get to 4s and 5s, it might be a broken bone, right, because they can heal back. But when you start to get 6 and 7s, you're talking about probably an ACL or maybe a labrum tear and things like that. You get to 8 and 9s, you're talking about chondral defects and different things that are like, ooh, don't know if I can fix that. And then how many times they had it. So instead of saying you're a C and you're a C medical, you're a C3 and you're a C7. Okay, that's because of the difference in the medical. And that was a really good way for us to kind of finally layer out the real medical in these guys, because that is the number one reason we're all here.
Well, and that brings up the fact that some of these people that maybe are in positions where they could have unknotted a tie, that are not performing on the field or participating in drills, not performing. Do you have a feeling about that? Do you care? Are people making too big a deal out of it, or do you think it is important?
I like that you said performing, because I always was told that we're in the entertainment business first. So technically we are performing, right? Even though it's a heck of a sport. I don't have a problem with it. I'm kind of old school in that, meaning that if you work out at the combine and you put it all on tape, I don't think you should do it. I don't think you should work out at your pro day. You're done.
Yeah.
Like you just did it on the biggest stage in front of millions of people, and now 2 weeks later we're going to go to your pro day and go do the exact same stuff. Like, why would you, as a person that's like, kind of seeing it from the lens of a player's perspective, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself out there like that? I would never. If it was my son, I'd say, you just did it. Like, you don't need to do it. Now, if you want to go and prove a time and prove a drill or something because you felt like it didn't go well, that's one thing. But the same thing would go, like, if you don't do it here, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with the players that don't do it. Like Ohio State guys, if they don't want to do anything here, they just played 17 games. They played an NFL season. And we're like, which NFL player right now is working on their vertical jump in their 40s time? None, right? So, yes, the workout part's important. It's not, I should say important. I would say the entire pro day / combine experience should probably be somewhere between 5 and 10% max of the player evaluation. Yes, it doesn't matter. Like Pierce running 4.49 yesterday certainly put him I already had him in the first round, and I think most people did, but that kind of solidified he's going round 1. So it does solidify things a little bit to work out. But did I look at Pierce before the combine? Because we already had draft meetings. He's already on the board as a first-round pick. So this just kind of helps you validate. The thing I think for the combine and for the pro days, if they don't do it, is the outliers that you didn't expect. Like, this guy ran slower than I thought, or this guy ran faster than I thought. Why did I not feel like I saw that on tape? That's really where you use the combine. It's not, look how fast he is, I want that guy. It's more of like, did I see that trait when I watched him on film?
What do you do with a Shamar Stewart, who the relative athletic score, unofficially 9.99 out of a possible 10, which ranked 3rd out of 1,802 defensive ends that were measured in this way from 1987 to 2025. So a beast of an athlete. How much does that matter?
That he is that?
Yes.
It helps.
Compared to the rest of the evaluation that goes along with him.
Yeah, again, if you weigh it out, because Mike Mamula, right? If you're old school and you know that name, Eagles draft pick who came to the combine and destroyed it, was an elite athlete, goes I think 7th in my mind overall in the draft, and has a horrible career, sadly, right, for him. You can't let that stuff impact exactly what did he look like on tape. Because the one thing that I watch, and you as a former linebacker, it's functional football strength is so critical. It's not the 225. It's all that's beautiful, and it's for show. Warren Sapp, I think, did 12. And he was probably the most powerful, most talented leverage player I've ever seen in my life. some people ask me who's the best player I ever got to be around. I'd say it, and I've been around Hall of Famers, and but Warren Sapp was probably the best player I've ever got to be a part of their team. Maybe Derek Thomas, that's probably really close in terms of how great Derek was, but Warren was up there. That doesn't mean anything, but to me, when I watch tape, I watch the functional strength. So linebacker, when you hit a person, which way does the ball go? Where does the ball end up? Is it 1 or 2 yards down the field as you drag him and pull him down, or is it like boom, hit him, maybe it's 3 inches this way, 4 inches that way? It's same with running backs. It's those hidden yards that as you're watching tape, when I watch tape, it's those hidden yards where you don't think about it like, oh yeah, he made the tackle, he got check a tackle. Well, did he get 4 more yards as he made the tackle, or 3 more yards, or did he get stopped? Because it is a game of inches. And so even the offensive lineman, if you can't anchor, you can't play in the National Football League. There's one thing you got to watch. Can he anchor? And how does he anchor? Like, where does he drop his weight, and where's he got the flexibility? But functional football strength overrides those kind of numbers as an athlete, because there's been really great athletes in this league that just haven't been great football players.
I'm liking all this process stuff, like the C9, you mentioned 5%. How did you learn or come up with or innovate or invent these processes as a general manager?
Log jams. It felt like when my draft board, and watch it again, I'm blessed to be with like Kansas City and how they did it, and then go to Tampa Bay and see different people do it, whether it was Rich McKay or it was Bruce Allen. It was Carl Peterson back in Kansas City, and the different ways they approached the draft was very helpful for me through that. But what I always saw was in Tampa, we had a grading scale where it was like 5.5 to like a 6.4 is where all the players was. And 5.5s were like the camp kids, 5.6 were like priority free agents, 5.7s were like potential, 5.8s were backups, 5.9s were starters, and then the 6s were like more elite, right? Well, you look at a draft board and you're like, man, we got a whole draft board of just 5.9s and 5.8s. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That's too many people stuck. And so what I did with my scouts is we kind of stayed in the same scale, but then I also had them say, hey, look, I need you to tell me what rounds you also think they're going to go in. So you might be a 5.8, but is he a 3.0 or a 3.9? And what does that mean? Well, I think 3.0, so I did a 0.1, 0.5, and 0.9, and then you round. So if I said you're a 4.5, that means I think you're going middle of the 4th round. If you're 4.9, I think you're going bottom of the 4th round. So it would correlate the draft grade. If I give a guy a 61, but I thought he was a 2.5, something's wrong. Like either I've got him too high here, or I don't have him on the right part of the board, to try to, again, start pulling people apart, instead of just saying, hey, everybody's a 2nd round pick or everybody's a 59, if that makes sense.
I love process conversations. I know so many people that are going to love just like listening to that breakdown and take notes. And I want to go back to the quarterback real quick, because this is a conversation that I have been stuck on, and I think you're a perfect person to ask. The quarterback that falls to the 3rd, and the likelihood that that person ever sees the field. So if you grab a quarterback in the 3rd, what does that mean about your evaluation? And then, because I think sometimes people say, oh, we'll go with a veteran bridge now, and we'll just take a shot on a quarterback here in the 3rd that needs to be developed. Like a Jalen Milroe, I think, is a guy who you're probably not putting on the field right away this year. You're thinking of developing him. But it's hard to develop quarterbacks in the NFL because of just how busy it is on a week-to-week basis. Like, no one has time to actually, take someone who's not the starting quarterback and go off to the side and give them reps. And so I'm curious about your thoughts about somebody that does fall down the draft board that you're like, not yet, but how realistic is the not yet turning into, outside of an injury or something anomalous happening that puts that person on the field where you do get an eval? My thought is that sometimes those players might just get lost in the wash and never see the field.
A little bit. I feel like you're picking on me because I chose Mike Glennon in the 3rd round, so I feel like you're kind of picking on me a little bit here. I don't know if you guys feel. 3rd round pick, Mike Glennon, I get it. I took him, and he had to play early because of what happened with Josh Freeman in his career. So,
well, that makes it, you need the backup.
You have to have the backup.
The structure of your room matters, clearly.
Right.
I'm talking about the long-term.
Right. No, I know.
Yeah.
So Ron Wolf, I feel like, always had it right? If you can draft an extra quarterback somewhere in the draft, go ahead and take him. And see what happens, because if they develop, great, and if they don't, or whatever, you might trade them off. They might become an asset for something else. You might get a compensatory pick one day down the road because you have a starting quarterback. So I was always in the belief of doing that. Now for this, the thing I look at now that's different than probably when I was GM, because of how much the position's changed, right? How athletic the position has become is ridiculous, right? The one thing I feel like I'm seeing, and you might be able to back it up, is the athletic quarterbacks seem to be becoming more and more accurate as they get into the National Football League. Like, because they're athletic, they can find a little more time, they can find the better throw, and the traditional pocket passer really isn't becoming more accurate as they get into the National Football League. But I can take a guy that, and I think that's what the Colts fell into with Richardson, is they're like, I think we can make him more accurate. And that's not worked out for the Colts, clearly. But I do think for the Jalen Hurts of the world, the Lamar Jacksons of the world, and I think for the Jalen Millers of the world, you're like, well, he is such a good athlete that maybe he will develop, because the one thing I feel like coaches are doing is they're developing these athletic quarterbacks to become more accurate quarterbacks and now have a much better weapon system to use. And so if I have a guy like that in the third round, I'm going to take him because I'm going to find a package for him and see what he can do.
Okay, a package. Because that's where I'm getting lost is, outside of that injury, how do you, like, they can practice, they can get some reps in practice, but you never even get the opportunity to see them in an environment like a Joe Milton, I think, is a good example, right? Yeah. In New England, who has flashed in some preseason games, and to the point where you're like, hey, there's some desperate teams out there. Maybe they can get something for him from a team that needs something like that. But there's also as high a likelihood that they hang on to him because they need depth.
Yes.
And then
it's
he
cheap.
just never has the chance. And so he's the perfect example of a guy that just screams, come get me. I can maybe be better than my lot in life, but the opportunity just is, it's tough to get that to present itself once you're locked into the system in the slot that you are.
It is, and if I'm being selfish and I'm Elliott Wolf or the Patriot way, I'm not trading for 3 years anyway. It's too good of a deal. I have such a discount at number 2 quarterback as a sixth round pick. In my mind, he's a 6th round pick, maybe he's 5th. What was Joe Milton? You guys remember?
I don't even know.
I feel like he was a 6th, but maybe he was a 5th. But anyway, the point is that now you've got your starter in Drake, and you've got Joe Milton, and the amount of money you have invested in the quarterback room is probably the least in the National Football League, right? So it allows you to go do exactly what you want to do. 6th round.
193.
It's close. Did I say 6th?
Nailed it.
Okay, good. I can't remember. No, so I wouldn't, even if Joe Milton flashes like we've seen even in the regular season finale, I just hold on to that card until I've got to play it, which I don't want to play it until year 3, because I don't want to replace him when I know I've got Drake May, who I think is going to be spectacular in this league. Wait and see. I think Drake May is going to be up there with Jaden Daniels. We're going to be talking about Drake May I think Drake May will be better than Caleb Williams.
I'm excited about that for Drake May, but that hurts my heart with Caleb.
I feel bad for Chicago fans.
Well, what do you think?
Not that bad. It's not like Caleb's going to be just terrible or anything like that.
We've taken up way too much of your time, by the way, but you just keep dropping these things that, like, I'm like, I can't let you go, sorry. Caleb with Ben. Like, what do you think Ben Johnson, now
so
I
think
there, how does that change things for him?
So that's great, right? Because he can obviously call plays, right?
Not enough is what I'm getting from you.
You're
like, that's cute.
It's Caleb that's got to change.
Okay.
It's not Ben. It's not the system. I don't think anybody in Chicago was like, we've got a terrible system. We don't know what we're doing. This is the same thing. I sat here at the Combine last year and said, the problem I have with Caleb Williams is he thinks it's too easy. He thinks it's too easy, and he doesn't understand how much work it is. And when you go and present yourself as the number 1 pick, and you decide to don't do the Combine, don't do anything. Again, I don't have a problem with that, right? If Cam Ward says I'm not doing anything, great, do that, Cam. I'm fine. But you don't compare yourself to Michael Jordan in Chicago, and he did, and that's a big no-no. That means you have no awareness of who you are or what Michael Jordan meant or what he was. And to me, that told me that Caleb doesn't have really good self-awareness, and that means that I'm concerned he's not going to be able to fix his problems. Instead, he's like talking about how, well, I'm glad I've got somebody here that can motivate me and get me going. Not a quarterback, you don't. If you can't do that yourself, you think Drew Brees was never motivated every day he walked on the practice field? He ripped people to shreds in the huddle. And so, to be great, I worry that he doesn't have that element to his game, even though I think he's a fantastic, athlete and a talented quarterback. I worry that that's never going to come to fruition.
Mark, this has been phenomenal.
Yeah, you're nice.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
I really appreciate it. Tell people where they can find you on all of the different platforms that you're on.
So I do SiriusXM, Channel 88, NFL Radio. I usually do Friday, co-host with Bruce Murray, because I can't host a show because I could never get through the reads, and I can't bring you in and out of a break because I feel like I'm just stumbling. So I don't do that, but I do host that. I do VSiN, buy the book during the season. I'll do that a couple days.
Are apparently nailing it, so we should be tuning in and winning some money.
And then I do a GM the GM Shuffle, which was Mike Lombardi's old project that I've kind of assumed now that he's kind of busy in North Carolina. And so I do that every Monday. I do a 1 hour GM Shuffle, where just kind of, and I'm doing a little building the board segment right now, where I break down like 3 or 4 guys that are in this draft class and kind of put them on the 1.5, the 1.9, the 2.0, but more of the top players, just so it's easier for everybody to kind of know to follow those guys. So it's been fun.
Well, listening to you here makes me want to go check out all of those things. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
I was trying to take notes without taking notes, because that's the problem with being on camera is I'm like, the stuff that you want to remember, like when it's on a Zoom, I can be like, I was like, at a certain point, I was like, what was the thing at the top that I was trying to say, don't forget, don't forget,
I
don't
took you
forget.
too far in a different direction every time. I was like, this guy talks too much.
No, it was Trevor Lawrence.
Oh.
It was Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Bye, bud.
Thanks, Mark.
My pleasure. See you guys.
See you later. So long.